What is up, Scream Team? Zach Cherry here, and in this video, which has been highly requested for some time now, I'm going to rank every single kill within the entire Scream franchise, which is currently films 1 through 5 if you are watching in the future. But if you are brand new to my channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, toss this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments down below which kill is your favorite. So just because there are so many kills that we're dealing with here, and most of them are very similar in the sense that they are basic stabbings, there's going to be some criteria that I'll be looking at just in terms of how I'll allot them amongst the tier rankings. So things I'll be taking into consideration are blood and gore effects, innovation, acting, suspense buildup, the musical score that accompanies the kill, and the emotional impact. But they will fall in, one of 5 categories, which are essentially best to worst, but I've labeled them savaged beyond recognition, carnage candy, cut into fish sticks, did you really put her liver in the mailbox, and stop effing up my ending. So starting with Steve Orth, I would classify this as being in carnage candy. We do get a very quick shot of the actual damage, which always looks to me like lasagna. And I know that in the original cut, they showed it for a lot longer. The actor actually doesn't have his hand tied to the chair because he's pumping the guts through some tube that's giving it the effect that it's falling out. And I think I actually prefer the theatrical version. It's almost like one of those cases of less is more, like just the quick shot of seeing it is always scarier. And then also just incorporating Marco Beltrami's score into the mix as well. I think that this is a very memorable kill. But in terms of Casey, this is kind of the golden standard. I mean, I don't want to say that the franchise peaked within its opening scene, just in terms of kills, but in terms of just like the impact, like the tone of the scene and, how it affected the audience, I don't think that it'll ever get better than Casey. Like, we're going to have a lot gorier effects, but this one is just like very effective with the way that it sets it up, because there is that sliver of hope that she could get away. And I think it's just the way that the film teases the audience that way, like that makes it all the more excruciating, because there is something so brutal and cruel about this one. But I think there's also like other factors in play here that make this so good, like Drew's acting especially. And of course, I already mentioned the Marco Beltrami score, but I think also Wes Craven in just the little nuances that he puts in there, like her removing the mask from the killer. We never seen that again during any other kill scene. And I think just culminating in that final shot, that wide shot of her hanging in the tree there, like that is so creepy and it'll always disturb me. So then we come to Principal Himbry, and I feel like this is a very underrated kill in the movies because nobody ever remembers it. But what I like about this one is that there's kind of this cat and mouse game that the killer's playing with him before sneaking out from behind the door. But again, in terms of certain elements like the acting, because I think Henry Winkler does like a really good job of screaming in pain and death. But we also get those nice little touches, like just seeing the blood pool up from his torso after he's lying on the ground. And of course, the reflection of Ghostface in his eye. That's another thing we've never seen since the original. But I think the fact that the musical score does sort of transition into the Alice Cooper song, like that really makes this memorable for me at least. So I'm going to put this in Carnage Candy. I'll put this below the Steve one because I don't think it's as disturbingly gross. And then we get to Tatum, and this is something that the first movie does really well that I feel like kind of gets away from them in the later sequels, where every kill is kind of designated as its own set piece. Like here, obviously we have this entire garage sequence, and just the fact that it's just her alone with the killer, that makes all the difference in the world. When we compare it to later on where there's just like multiple kills happening in quick succession with one another, I feel like the movie really takes its time to build up this particular kill. And I love the fact that she fights back. Like, this is not an easy win for the killer in any way whatsoever, but it sort of forces the killer to then get creative, like using their surroundings for the kill, because we're getting obviously the garage door crushed. And in any other basic slasher movie, this would have just been a stab. So I'm glad that we did get a much more fleshed out scene here, and that we did get kind of like an iconic set set piece out of it too with that garage door. We also get some pretty good practical effects with that dummy head. And again, the Marco Beltrami score, like I cannot sing enough praises for Marco Beltrami, especially in the first 3 movies, of just like how his music just syncs up so perfectly with the kills. And even Rose McGowan's acting, like I don't want to undersell her in this scene at all. So I'm gonna say that this is savaged beyond recognition. I would put it personally below Casey's because that's more iconic to me, but it definitely deserves top tier. Next up we have Kenny Brown, which is apparently the character's name now. And you know, this is a pretty basic, you know, like throat slash thing. Like there's nothing great about it just in terms of like the effect of it all. But what I like is sort of the novelty of having the 30-second camera delay. Like that's what really sells this particular kill for me. So I think if that wasn't in there, this probably would have been a lot lower, because this is where we're getting into the portion of the movie where all hell breaks loose and it's just kind of like a free-for-all of just going around and killing. We're attacking whoever is there. So we're not really taking our time to marinate in every kill. And I feel like just because it was set up so well with the camera delay, that this elevates it a lot more for me. So I would put this in Carnage Candy. Then we get Stu Mocker. And okay, here's the thing. Like the killers, I feel always get like very boring, not boring, but just very simple kills. And when you look at most of the movies, I think that Stu probably has one of the most creative deaths, just in terms of like getting the TV dropped on his head. I love how this introduces kind of like the sarcastic Sydney, just like her quippy one-liners when she's doing the killers in. So I think that, you know, for factors like that, and also I don't want to like take away from the actual kill itself, because I do like the sound design of just like the electric shocks and all that happening to him. And then Matthew Lillard's kind of like at the end of it. So just because this is so memorable to me, like when I think of Ghostface killer deaths, I would put this in savaged beyond recognition. And then finishing off the first movie with Billy Loomis. Honestly, like I think that every kill in this movie is fantastic, but I think that this is probably, I don't even want to say it's my least favorite, but it's just the most basic. It's just, you know, a gunshot to the head. And I love that it's sort of set up in a way that it's very comedic in how it's done. And Sydney again gets to have one of her little one-liners. But when it comes to the killer, I always appreciate it more when there's overkill with them. Like I want them to die just a little bit extra. And of course, you know, he does get the umbrella impalement and then shot by Gale as well. It always really comes down to what like the finishing blow was, and just like the shot to the head, that scene, it's more so set up like a gag moment to me. So it's great. I love the way that they do it in the movie, but you know, I would still prefer everything else above that one, if that makes sense. So now coming into Scream 2, the first one we get is Phil Stevens. And what I love about this one is how this just makes me so scared to, you know, put my head against any sort of surface, because you don't know what's coming. And I think it's made all the more effective by the fact that here's Omar Epps, he's got a shaved head. So we've got like the bare exposed skin right up against the partition of the bathroom stall. And knowing that knife is going right into his ear made even more effective of just like the killer whispering right beforehand. Because as an audience, that kind of forces us to lean in and try to hear it even more. And when we're putting so much effort into trying to listen to something and then having the killer stab the character like literally through the ear, there's just something so visceral about that sensation of just like the feeling of seeing that and knowing that it makes it very uncomfortable, but in like the best way possible. So this kill has always stood out to me as one of the better ones. So I would put this in savaged beyond recognition. Also great usage of Marco Beltrami's score while this happens as well. I cannot say enough about him. Same with the Maureen Evans kill, like the score in that entire sequence when the killer comes back to the theater and how it escalates to her walking up on that stage at the end. Like this is one of the best deaths in the franchise. Like this is definitely top tier for me. This is savage beyond recognition. I would put this below the Casey Becker one just because I feel like the fact that there is that glimmer of hope that Casey could get away with it, like, you know, makes it all the more devastating in the end. And I feel like we don't get that with Maureen, but just in the way that Jada Pinkett sells this death, like she makes this look painful. She's got the eyes bugging out, the bulging veins in her neck and forehead. Like it's so gross. But I especially love how into the kill Ghostface is here. Like it's almost like this sexual thing for him. Like he's just really getting off when he sticks takes the knife in that last time and kind of tilts back into it. But I think just the overall gravitas of this scene, like it's pandemonium. That theater is chaotic, and everything that's happening there, of just like her getting up there and people kind of like booing at her until they go quiet when they realize what's actually happening, and she lets out that guttural scream before keeling over and dying. That's just like the perfect way to end an opening scene. So the next up we have CC Cooper, and not that I ever hear like criticisms for this, but I know this does feel like just another Casey Becker scene. But what I really love about what they do with this scene, and especially just in terms of the musical score and how it's sort of like building up and escalating, because as she's running up those stairs at the end and just like more stairs and more stairs, it just really emphasizes how high up she's getting in this house, only to then be thrown off the top. Like that was a long way for her to fall. I also really love how aggressive Ghostface is here. Like he's just done with her crap. Even like the grunting and how angry he sounds of just like stabbing her and being like, enough of this knife stuff, I'm just gonna throw you off the edge. But we also get that really great shot of, you know, kind of like the Michael Myers Halloween, her lying on the ground, and then with the knife wipe as well. That's all really great. The only thing that kind of holds this back is that there's some weird editing. Like I feel like there was more to this chase scene that got cut, because when you see her running up the stairs, Ghostface is literally right behind her, and then in the next frame she's all the way down this hall and he's just coming around the corner. But just in terms of, again, like the score and how it sort of transitions into the Everclear song, that might be one of the best musical transitions ever in any movie. So I'm gonna put CC, I'll put her below Phil. So next up is Randy, and the thing that works best about this kill is the element of surprise, because our attention in that moment, I think, is more so with Gail and Dewey trying to find the killer on the campus ground with the cell phone, that we're not really thinking that Randy's in any danger. And I love how Wes does his thing where, you know, we see the aerial shot of the quad, and when it starts off and there's a lot of people there, but by the time Randy gets pulled into the van, it's completely emptied. And then when he does get pulled into the van, which is an homage to A Kill from Slumber Party Massacre, by the way, we get that great shot of the kill happening through the side view mirror. So, you know, I always get annoyed when these movies sometimes will block or obscure a kill from happening. But I think in a situation like this, it is very creatively done, that I do like it. What I don't like about this is more so the discovery of the body afterwards, because it doesn't look good. He's got like what looks like strawberry syrup all over his body. There's even like a slit in his throat, like the killer also sliced his throat, which is inconsistent with the sound design. Like we don't hear that happening. We just hear him getting stabbed. So maybe the reason why that was shown very quick is because there was more to it. Like he did get his throat slashed, and that could have been something that was censored after the fact. But, you know, as it is, like I like the way that this scene works just in terms of its surprise element. So I'm gonna put this in Carnage Candy. I'll put it at the top of Carnage Candy. Now next up we have Officer Andrews. He's the first officer, the one driving the car, who gets his throat slashed. And, you know, I think it's a decent enough looking wound when we do briefly get to see it from the side, but the fact that we don't really get to see it, like it's blocked very weirdly. I think that Wes was trying to show the action from Sydney's perspective from the backseat, and that's why we don't really see it very well, but it is such a basic kill and it's done in 2 seconds that I would put this into cut into fish sticks, because I do think it looks good when, you know, we see it from the side and him choking on his own blood. But, you know, like we could have done more. You know, there's only so many kills in this movie, but it does lead into a great kill right after that, which is the other officer, Officer Richards, who gets like what I can only call a Final Destination style death, because he full on gets that pole impaled through his skull. And, you know, we don't see stuff like that in the Scream franchise very often at all. I mean, this is really the only time I would say anything was like that, but it's just such a great use of practical effects. And I love how his body is still kind of like convulsing and writhing on the hood of the car before he finally just dies. And what's impressive to me about this is that they were able to achieve like this fantastical kill by ways of like the script. Like it didn't feel contrived or just like out of place, because it works within the context of them driving into that construction construction site. And I love how the pole going through his head still kind of works into the movie of just like how Sydney and Hallie end up escaping. So I would say that this is savage beyond recognition. I think I'll put this above Phil, which then brings us to Hallie. And I really love the scene that precedes this, but just the fact that we don't get to see anything here. We just see Ghostface jump out from the side and start stabbing her, but it cuts to Sydney and we're more so watching her reaction to it, which is fine. Like, I feel like it's important that we do get to see Sydney's reaction, but it was almost like at the detriment of getting more gore in that moment. I do like how, you know, you get to hear it, like it's a very squishy knife kill. And maybe that's just because we're not seeing it that our other senses are heightened. But I'll always remember this kill for the way it sounds, if that makes sense. So I'm actually going to put this in cut into fish sticks, which might seem a little bit low, but those are my reasons for it. I still think that all of these kills are really good. But then next we have Derek. And the thing with this is, like, I'm not a big fan of gun kills in movies, and especially for like a slasher movie, I just feel like it's so cheap and gratuitous that, you know, again, you only have a specific number of casualties. Why waste it with a gun kill? But what I like about this one in particular is sort of the intent behind it, like the emotional manipulation that Mickey is doing to Sydney, but also like the audience at the same time, because we have no idea if we can trust Derek at that point. I mean, I will say, like, just in terms of like the practicalness of it, like it does look really good just in terms of how he's shot, but it always comes back to just like the emotional resonance of the scene for me. I think that that's what makes it more impactful, because this was a huge loss for Sydney and, you know, even us, because, you know, it threw us for a loop. I'm gonna put this one in Carnage Candy. Definitely above Billy. Like, I like the way that, you know, gun usage is used here rather than Billy, but maybe here, maybe above Kenny. But then in terms of Mickey, actually, I like this a lot. This is probably the most ridiculous kill, at least until we get to 5, I think, because there's something so John Woo action flick about this. Like, just the way that Mickey's body goes flying backwards as Gale and Sydney open fire on him. I also love the misdirection of just like how we're expecting the same thing with Mrs. Loomis that we saw in the first movie with Billy, only for Mickey to jump up. And then I'll never get tired of Liev Schreiber or Cotton Weary's delivery of his line right after. Whoa! So for this one, I'm actually going to say this goes above Himbry. But then for Mrs. Loomis, who technically I probably should have put before Mickey because, you know, I think that she dies first. But some people do consider the double tap. Like this, to me, it's still similar to the Billy thing in Scream 1. I like this a little bit better because I feel that like Sydney's response is a little bit more authentic. Like she's very cold about the whole thing, just like the line delivery. And it just feels more pragmatic of the character to say just in case. Whereas I feel like the first movie, while that's hilarious and just like not in my movie, it does feel a little contrived in a way. So now moving on to Scream 3, this is where things will probably take a little bit of a dip because as we all know, this movie was heavily censored. So starting with Christine Hamilton, Cotton's girlfriend, I like this kill for the most part. I think that like what hurts it is the fact that there's this jump cut that I guess that they couldn't time the scream and the stab right, but also the fact that it's over with right away. It's like one and done and like tosses her back. But you know what really does work for this is again the Marco Beltrami score. I think like that particular cue that comes up as soon as she gets stabbed is some of like the best music in like any of the Scream soundtracks. And also Kelly Rutherford's scream in that instance as well. Like again, like just like these really guttural screams, like she screams well. There's also this element to it that goes back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the character of Pam, who's like wearing this backless top and she gets hung on the meat hook, which just really embellishes the contact of the hook into the skin. And I feel like here you have this character who's wearing this nightgown, the killer is stabbing into her back where the skin is exposed. It just makes me cringe. Like I love it, you know? So just because I feel like it could have been improved upon had there not been all the censorship, I'm gonna say cut into fish sticks. I'll put her below Hallie. So then we have Cotton Weary. And honestly, like I'm not a fan of this kill because Scream Scream 1 and 2, they're just such grandiose scenes. Like we've the final shot of both of them end with like a scream of a character. Whereas here, Cotton's just like laying on the floor and he just looks confused. It's just kind of like, how did I end up here? It feels so weak. Like the opening scenes are supposed to be big and elaborate and fantastic. And this one just felt so pedestrian to me, especially with just how easily the killer overtakes Cotton in that last moment there. I know there is an alternate take of this scene where he tries to escape out of a skylight above him and Ghostface actually stabs him in the leg and pulls him back down. Like it did give this a little bit more teeth, but for what they ended up having to use because of censorship or, you know, what they felt was more effective, I just found this to be very tepid. I've also heard some people say that he gets stabbed in the head here, which I've never seen. I mean, I've looked at this kill frame for frame and it does not reflect that at all. I feel like it's just the killer bringing the knife down onto Cotton's chest again. So even if it was the head, it doesn't work just with the way that everything was cut here. So I'm actually going to say that Cotton's kill is less effective for me than Christine. So I'll put him below her for now. But then we come to Sarah Darling, and this is just bad. I just feel like the scene that this is in is just really devoid of a lot of tension in general. The most effective part is how we see Ghostface hiding among the other Ghostface costumes. But just in terms of like the mini brawl that happens with the prop weapons and all that, it's not funny nor scary to me. And just like how easily the killer in this case is able to overtake her, because it's just like knocks her into the window and then stabs her once and then she slings over dead, which makes me think that there was more to it. Like maybe there was more stabbing that got cut. So because of that, I'm going to put this in, did you really put her liver in the mailbox? I think this is the worst kill thus far in this ranking. Then we come to Steven Stone, Jennifer's security guard. And I actually like this one. I think that there's some good misdirection that's set up here with Dewey on the phone, or us thinking that Dewey's on the phone, which then leads into that great line by Ghostface.
I can't believe you said that. That makes me angry.
And mostly, I just really love the physicality of the scene between them, because this is confined to like the small space of this trailer and just sort of this little knockout brawl that they've got going on, and Ghostface having to use the frying pan. I would have liked it to maybe be extended a little bit more just in terms of like the fight in the trailer. But I feel like the thing that comes after of him stumbling up to the house and dropping over, that was a little goofy. Like maybe we could have done without that. But in terms of everything else, it was okay. So I would put this in cut into fish sticks. Probably put it above Hallie. So then for Tom Prince, I mostly just like really hate this kill. Like this is stop effing up my ending for a myriad of reasons. I think mostly this is just very illogical and impractical. There's a lot of variables working here that need to line up perfectly for the killer to be able to kill someone in this instance, of the gas and the fax machine and having a lighter and all that, that it feels very contrived. I'm all for variety in my kills. Again, like we don't need everything to be a stabbing, but just the way that this whole scene was set up and like how they went about it, like it looks really stupid in the moment where he does explode. Like it just wasn't great effects in just that one bit. This is probably the worst of the franchise, actually. And then that brings us to Angelina. Well, really that brings us to Angelina, Tyson, and Jennifer, because there's a stretch of the movie of like maybe 40 minutes where there are no kills, and then we get 3 in quick succession. Like it's like 2.5 minutes where all of these characters get killed one by one by one. And I don't like that. I prefer like the first 2 movies where character kills are kind of like isolated to specific set pieces, like Tatum in the garage. But here, just because everything is grouped together so quickly, like there's nothing memorable about anything that happens here. We're not really given enough time to marinate with the characters before they end up getting scooped out. So with Angelina in particular, I'm not a big fan of this kill because mostly we don't see it. It's like she runs down the stairs and we're either seeing it from behind her or behind the killer. So there's not really like any actual blood or gore that's shown. And then of course we keep cutting back to Gail and Jennifer. But I'd say that the only effective part of this is when they do kind of look over the railing and they see her dead, limp body there being dragged away. I don't want to say it amends it, but it's at least like a nice little touch that adds a little bit something to it. So I'd actually say that this is, did you really put her liver in the mailbox? box territory. I would put her above Sarah though. And then with Tyson, he does have that funny one-liner, but other than Ghostface pulling the carpet out from under him and him doing that flip, this just feels like a low-rent version of the CC kill from Scream 2. Only here, there's no build-up to it, you know, like there was in that movie. And we don't even really see the body afterward. Like, not immediately after, we do see him later, but it just felt like we just have to quickly discard of these people. There's too many people in the movie, and we've let them survive too long, so now we're just getting rid of them really quickly. And that's what this whole sequence feels like to me. So I'm gonna put him, I'd put him a little bit higher. I would say, I'll put him between Christine and Cotton, just because he does have that one-liner. And then that brings us to Jennifer. And unlike the last two, I feel like there is some innovation here, at least with the two-way mirror trick, because at least there's suspense that's built up there. And I definitely feel like this character deserves so much more than those last two characters, but I feel like she probably deserved even more than what she got here. And that whole scene in particular, like the violence again is very obscured. Like we keep cutting back and forth. We're not really seeing anything. I think even considering the fact that there was only so much that they could show to us at the time because of censorship, Jennifer deserved her own full scene, just like a full set piece behind the mirror. Like it just felt so rushed. So I am going to put this in Carnage Candy because I like the concept of it. I like the character. I just feel like the execution could have been better. So I'm going to put this at the bottom of Carnage Candy. And then we have Milton, who, I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is another basic throat slit. What kind of makes this effective is in the sense that he's bound, like he's restrained, his hands are tied behind the back. So it gives this more of a vulnerable feeling to it. Like there's no way that he could defend himself or anything. But again, you know, it's basic. They could only show so much. So I will put this always makes me wince too, actually. I would put this above Tyson. And then lastly for Scream 3, we have Roman Bridger. And I think similar to Mickey in a way, like this is a more innovative kill just in terms of like the gunshot to the head, because we do get more. We do get Sydney stabbing him in the back with the ice pick. We get the Sydney quippy one-liner. We also get the afterward stuff of him jumping back up and charging at Dewey as the bullets are kind of pushing him back until Sydney is like, head. But there's also an emotionality to this kill, just in a sense of the loss, really, because we do see Sydney and Roman holding hands, almost kind of like wondering about this life that they could have had. So it just like kind of more depth for Sydney in a way that just shows her humanity and her compassion for her brother, that I really like that about it. I appreciate that. So there is more nuance to the kill than just like the Billy one or the Mrs. Loomis one. So I think that I would put this above those two for sure. And I might even put it above the Kenny 30-second delay one. So anyway, now we're moving into Stab 6 or Scream 4. But the first one we have is Trudy. And I feel like these next three are going to be really hard to put anywhere, because I feel like it's hard to contrast the tone of the stab kills with the tone of the like regular Scream kills, because these next three kills are like supposed to be ridiculous. They're meant to be silly. Stab is a schlocky inferior version of Scream. So right off the bat with Trudy, we have this very exaggerated kill. She almost like emphatically throws her hands up in the air. I've never understood that. When the killer jumps out from behind the wall and just stabs her once in the chest, it's almost like she just falls off of the knife, which I think is hilarious. So it's similar to Hallie in a way, and it's only one stab rather than several, but we see the whole thing, and it's almost like meant to be parody. Like I do like it a lot better than that one, so I would probably put this, I'll put it in the top of Cut Into Fish Sticks. But when we get to Sherry, who, you know, full on gets her throat slashed, this is where it differs from like the Kenny throat slash or the Milton throat slash, where it's just like dark red, almost like purple blood. This one is very cartoonish. Like there's a ridiculous amount of blood that comes out of her neck that it almost feels like way too fake to be in a Scream movie. But at the same time, like I kind of love it for that. Like that should have let us know that this was a stab movie that we were watching. So even though like tonally and graphically, for the most part, this is not like anything we see in Scream, I still really like it. So I would put this, you know, I'll put it at the bottom of Carnage Candy. Like I said, these stab kills are hard to figure out. And especially for the last one here with Rachel, because this is full on satire at this point. And I think that what really transcends this one is kind of like the action acting of both roles of Anna Paquin and Kristen Bell as the killer, but I just love the intent behind it, like the "you talk too much," and the second stab as well, and just the fact that we do get the blood dripping from the mouth and all that. Like, I feel like these first 3 kills, there's already so much more blood in this 5-minute span of movie than there ever was in Scream 3, so it was almost like a way of just being like, the blood is back. So I don't know, I would put this cut into fish sticks. But then when we get into the proper kills of Scream 4, I feel like this is where things don't work well, because the first one with Marnie, it's a nothing kill. Like, she gets killed off screen and thrown through the window. It's very much akin to Friday the 13th. There's a lot of instances where characters are killed off screen and then thrown in the window later. So maybe like I appreciate that much about it, but I still think that this belongs on the bottom, especially considering that the original kills for these characters before they switched things up were much better. And I'll get into that in a second because I'll go through Jenny first, but this one is also not good. I feel like there is a certain level of homage to the Tatum kill in the garage. And while with that kill, there's so much suspension of disbelief, I feel like here especially, you just can't convince me that a garage door would crush someone's spine if it was closed on it. Like, those things are flimsy. It would not do the kind of damage that we hear from that crunch. And I think that also just in terms of the chase scene that's implemented there, that's not even really a chase scene of just her running up the stairs and then through this attic door into the garage. But I think just culminating in like how it ends with the killer just like slashing their knife down, which is something that I feel is just become tradition at this point. Like, we saw it in 3, 4, and even at 5th movie right before the title card of just like the Ghostface slashing down. Like, it's so boring. They need to do something more creative, like the way that they did Scream 2. And then also the fact that the score as well, I just feel like in general, Marco Beltrami's score in Scream 4 does nothing for the kills, especially not like it did in the first 3 movies. So I'm gonna put this one in, did you really put her liver in the mailbox? I would put this below the other two because I feel like my expectations are so much higher for the opening scene rather than just kills committed throughout the movie. So this is definitely more of a letdown. The original sequence was so much better of Ghostface sneaking into the house behind Jenny, who is on the couch, and then getting stabbed incessantly while Marnie looks on incredulously, like she just thinks it's all a prank. And then the way that Marnie kind of has this existential realization that she's about to get killed by a figure from a movie. Like, that was all spectacular. Like, just it really added to the commentary of the movie. And what they went with was, again, so pedestrian. But next up, we have Olivia. And this is the one. This is the big death scene of this movie. You know, I mentioned before how, you know, if they were trying to censor something, we would instead see a character's reaction. And here, I feel like Wes does a really good job of capturing every angle of everything that's happening, because we do get to experience the violence and the attack and the kill. And we do get to see Jill and Kirby's reaction to that, and Sydney's reaction to that, and her running across the street. But despite the fact that we keep jumping all over the place, I feel like we never really lose anything from any perspective there. And again, I love how violent and mean this kill is. Like, it is brutal. And Sydney walking into that room of just seeing the blood spray all over the wall. And then, of course, Olivia, whose bed looks like a deli counter. But even like the misdirection leading up to it with the closet, you know, it was all chef's kiss. So I would put this in Savaged Beyond Recognition. I'm going to put this I'll put this between Maureen and Tatum. So now we have Rebecca Walters, and I feel like the scene itself of the car stuff and getting out and the alarm, like, you know, there wasn't a lot of tension there. I feel like that could have been done a lot better because it just felt very unrealistic that she would even get out of the car at that point. But what I do like about this is just the way that she gets stabbed. Just like how the killer runs up to her and almost sticks the knife into her like she's butter. Like, there's just something so smooth about the whole way it happened. And even as like gross as it kind of is, there's something so sensual about this, and just the way that, you know, she's looking at him and kind of quivering, like she almost like looks really woozy. Even speaking of overkill, I feel like the part that comes after this of the body getting thrown over the parking garage onto the van, like that was unnecessary. But everything else before that was okay, I guess. I would put this in cut into fish sticks. I'd probably put this above Hallie. finale, I guess. But then next up is Deputy Ross Haas, and there's really nothing I can say about this kill. I think the only positive, if there is one here, because it just comes out of nowhere, he gets stabbed once and just like falls out of frame. But just the fact that it's kind of like a 2-for-1, I would put that a little bit higher. It's still going in, did you really put her liver in the mailbox? But I enjoy it more than the Jenny Randall opening. So I would put that there. And then for the second part of Deputy Perkins getting stabbed in the head, I love the imagination of Wes Craven and just like how he sees something on like an ER documentary and decides, I need to put this in a movie of just someone getting stabbed in the head and surviving for several minutes after the fact. But the thing that undoes this for me, this kill in particular, is obviously the Bruce Willis line. Like, I feel like it was so unnecessary. It just kind of took away from the tone by making it a little bit more comedic than it had to be. Because even though, you know, he gets out of the car and he's swinging punches and we see Ghostface in the background just kind of like, what the hell's happening here? Like, just doing like the Michael Myers head tilt. I don't think I can ever reconcile with that Bruce Willis line. I will put this in Carnage Candy, probably a lot higher, but obviously with that caveat, I think I'll put it above Himbery. So then the next one we have is Kate Roberts. Very similar to Phil in the movie theater washroom stall. We have a character get stabbed through something, and I feel like this is not a very good rendition of that. Again, with a lot of the kills in Scream 4, they're played to comedic effect, and especially here because I feel like this is a character who, you know, we're supposed to feel an emotional attachment to. This is Sydney's aunt, her mother's sister, and, you know, not only does this movie like completely underwrite her, but even in this death scene alone, she's kind of reduced to a punchline. Like the goofy look on her face, the sound design of the knife going through, like it just feels so comical, and it's hit home even further by not only Sydney's delayed response to everything, but even Marco Beltrami's delayed score. Because with this kill, the music is not really fitting with what we're seeing on screen in the moment. And then I also don't like how after her body is pulled off of the knife is still sitting in the mailbox slot for like an extended few seconds before the killer pulls it out. I don't know, that's always bothered me. I do like when she spits up the blood, like that is effective, but everything else about this kill just feels so empty for especially like who should have been an important character in the movie. So it just feels like Scream 2 leftovers of, you know, a much better kill being done to a much lesser effect. So I think that I'll put it in cut into fish sticks. I'm gonna put this there, yeah. And then that brings us to Robbie Mercer. And this one feels like, you know, they were trying to set up a gimmick almost, like with the camera being on backwards. And I don't think that it really worked as successfully as it could have. Like this one always to me felt very basic. Again, where I feel like Scream 1 and 2 really built their kills around these set pieces. Everything that's happening here for a lot of these kills just feels like it's going through the motions, just getting rid of characters as it sees fit to. And even though Robbie is kind of like a goofy character, I still find that the joke that he makes about, you know, you can't kill me because I'm gay also takes away from like what could have been a darker, more violent tone of this movie just to make it more cartoonish again. I will say though that I like after the fact of after Sydney arrives and he comes stumbling up the porch, he kind of reminds me of Danny DeVito playing the Penguin in Batman Returns. But other than that, this is a kill that I have no allegiance to. So I would say that this is cut into fish sticks. I'll actually put this below Kate. And then next we have Trevor Sheldon. And I feel like similar to, you know, maybe like the Derek kill, there's a little bit of nuance to, you know, just the gunshot victim. Because while there is something that is so mean-spirited about it, like, you know, shooting his dick off, it still works within the dark comedy of what they're going for. And it sets up the spectacle that is about to come of Jill self-mutilating. So because it's so over the top, and I feel that even Nico Tortorella does a good job of just like expressing the pain in that moment, that I would put this higher than some of the other gun kills. You know, it's not my favorite, but we'll put it above the Loomises. And then we come to Charlie Walker, and I can understand why, you know, a kill like this might be tossed off as being nothing because, you know, this is a character who's considered by a lot of people to be pathetic. Like this is the only Ghostface killer who dies and then stays dead. There is no one last scare. But But I think that what's done really well with Charlie's death is that it feels very realistic in a way. Like, it looks painful, and there's obviously the betrayal of it, which is very different than, you know, what we see, for instance, with Mrs. Loomis turning on Mickey, which is extremely theatrical, which I love. But here, there's just something about the way that Charlie kind of like puffs out his chest before, you know, he's expecting Jill to stab him in the shoulder. That, again, like similar to, you know, something like John Milton getting his throat slashed while having his hands tied behind his back, just like adds to the vulnerability of the character in that moment that makes the impact of the knife into his heart feel all the more visceral. So I think the fact that Wes Craven was able to capture this, I would actually put this, I'll put it in Carnage Candy. I will own that because I still think that this does have a sense of realism to it. And even seeing him writhing on the floor afterwards, it's very uncomfortable. And if a kill can make me feel that level of discomfort, I think there's something to be said for it. So that brings us into Jill Roberts, and this is a spectacular kill just in terms of the defibrillator and Sydney's infamous one-liner once again. But what I would have liked is maybe if that was it, like if the defibrillator kill was the kill. But I don't know. There is just something of Jill getting shot in the chest rather than the head that does feel very unfinished to me. Not that I'm saying that she's still alive, but, you know, it's just like she wasn't dead enough. And I feel that they could have just leaned into the defibrillator stuff and like really just electrocuted the shit out of her. Even like partially melted her head if that's what it took. That would have been satisfying. But I do like the way that, you know, she falls forward and is laying there side by side with Sydney, because it does represent the duality of the characters. But in terms of the kill, I'd say this is Carnage Candy. I'd say that I like it better than, no, I'll put it above Mrs. Loomis just because of the defibrillator stuff. So now we're getting into Scream 5, and already right off the bat, I love how the violence here is so much more realistic, especially with the Vince kill. We've got the return of Red Right Hand playing on the car stereo, and then in the background after. It feels like a return to form after the cartoonishness of 4, which, you know, don't get me wrong, I still love, but I think that, you know, these kills are, you know, now becoming more grounded in reality. I know people will challenge me on 1, but I will say with this one in particular, because he is just stabbed once in the neck. But I love the performance of Kyle Gallner and just the way he plays that, and the blood spitting up right after that. Like, that is effective how they do it. And just in terms of radio silence, because they film this so much more dynamically than what we had seen previously, because he kind of stumbles away from the car and crawls away, and it's just shot so much better in that instance. And, you know, obviously Wes Craven is a master at his craft, but I feel like in some of those later entries, there wasn't as much attention to detail put into things like this. So I'm going to say that this is Carnage Candy. And you know what? I actually like this better than the Perkins kill. I'm going to put it up there. And then up next, we have the Judy Hicks kill. And this is a broad daylight kill in the suburbs. I think for this one, it's just like really the brutality here. Like, we start off, she's running up to the house, and I love how Ghostface kind of just like strafes out from behind a bush, and she almost runs into the knife. But even after she falls over and you get those first few stabs, it feels like it's over. But then they just keep going, and they're just getting more aggressive and more aggressive. And, you know, I love that wide shot as well, just like in front of the house. And then, of course, Marley Shelton giving that wonderful death face. I know there was supposed to be an added bit where she pulls off the mask, and I guess they took that out because this kill obviously comes right before the West kill, and that might have broken up the momentum. But I don't know, I would have been interested to see that if it was like a deleted scene or something. But in terms of Judy Hicks's kill and placement, I would actually say that this is top tier. I'll put it below Cece. So then that does bring us to Wes, and really my only complaint with this one is that I wish that there was more of a cat and mouse game. Like, I love the build up to everything of just the fake out of the cupboard doors and the fridge doors, but just when it comes to the killer opening up the front door, like, I would have liked a little bit more method to, you know, how they were luring him around. But in terms of like the actual blood and gore itself, like, I'm not sure if this was all practical effects or if there is some CGI in there, but it looks great, because I don't think we've seen a kill committed this slowly. It really takes its time and leaves you to think there could be an out for him. Like, we could see Wes gain the upper hand because the knife is moving so slowly towards his neck. Then it's like watching the slow, painful, like inevitable outcome. And I do love how the killer crouches down with with Wes as he slides down the side of the door. And also how like the knife never comes out either. Like the end of the scene is the shot with the knife still in the neck. So I would put this also in top tier. And this for me, actually, I would put this above the Final Destination impalement. I think it was that good. This is definitely the best kill of Scream 5. So then that brings us to Deputy Clay, which is, I guess, the character's name. I mean, this is a character we've never met. It's an off-screen kill. I feel like that automatically would put you in the bottom tier. But I think that the gore effects, you know, of the throat slash are really good. So it does elevate that slightly. So I would put that probably above all those guys. I would put it under Angelina because I do think that her sliding away at the end is effective. And then we've got Dewey. I don't want to get too much into the practicalities of Amber being able to kill him. We know that Dewey has suffered nerve damage and has a limp, so I don't understand why it's so far outside of the realm of possibilities that they could see this. But I think most people are seeing the scene incorrectly because there's this misconception that she's lifting him up off the ground, and we never actually see that. Like, his feet are always on the ground. She's actually crouching down lower as she jolts up to stab him, and then slowly starts to stand up as he jolts upwards. You can even see with the killer's boots that they're standing on their tippy toes just to try to get some height here. So I really wish that this, you know, whole narrative would subside, especially since she admitted to it, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just speaking about the kill itself. And, you know, I didn't realize this at first, but this kill is actually a reference to a finishing move of the playable Ghostface character in Call of Duty. So it was inspired by that. I think that maybe if I did have a criticism, it's that the bloodletting didn't feel like it was as much as it should have been, because, you know, we see all this blood splatter out on the floor, and I feel like, you know, if she's stabbing him with a knife and pulling it upwards, I would have liked to see something more falling out there, like this was like a full disembowelment. But the score that's now Brian Tyler is also exceptional, and especially in this moment right here. You know, if I was to compare this to the Randy kill in Scream 2, as these are both big returning characters, I think that Randy's kill definitely had the surprise element, whereas I feel like with Dewey, I didn't think that it was such a stretch that he was going to get killed. But this definitely had the emotional impact, whereas I feel like the Randy scene didn't as much. So just the fact that this was such a huge moment definitely elevates this a lot for me. So just because it does have that emotional wallop to it, I'd probably put it at the top of Carnage Candy above Randy's kill. So then we have Liv Mackenzie, and I mean, I feel like the only purpose this kill serves is for shock value. My complaints here are that, you know, again, there's a finite amount of kills that you can have in these movies, and especially with this movie, because there's only 8 kills, that I feel like them having to designate one of them to a headshot just feels a little cheap. And this is not like a Trevor or a Derek, where I feel like there was so much more relevance to the characters, just like why they were kind of being targeted or in that situation. Because with Liv here, it just feels like wrong place, wrong time, which more or less sums up this character in general in this movie. Because with Derek, where you get that emotional manipulation from Mickey, and Trevor, where there's that dark comedic edge with Jill, you don't really get any of that here. It's just there, like it feels very sensational. I will say, just in terms of practicalness, like it's done really well, very effectively, but I hate how it totally disappears within the same scene. Like if you watch it after she shoots her and Sam and Richie run into the kitchen, the blood that was sprayed all over the paintings on the wall and the body on the floor are nowhere to be seen. So that leads me to believe that maybe that wasn't the character's original demise, but this one is not very high for me. So I would put this, I'll put that below Robbie. So now coming to the killers of Scream 5. Both of these are just pure overkill, and that's what the killer's demise should always be. Like, they should just get killed a little bit more than everybody else, and then some. And just with Richie, because he's stabbed like 22, 23 times, throat slashed, gets really gruesome. And then of course, you know, he gets shot 3 times by Sam after the fact, you know, just in case. So it is kind of unconventional in a way, because we don't see this too often with the killers. And I don't know if it's just with these two because they are so lousy at being Ghostface killers, but it's definitely something that I would like to see employed in future installments with, you know, whoever the Ghostface is in like the next movie or the one after that. I just feel like there should be overkill when it comes to them. And with Richie in particular, I think it was much deserved. And I would put this below Wes. And then with Amber Freeman, exact same sentiments. Love the overkill. I like that she gets burned alive. Like, I don't think that we've seen a character set on fire in the franchise. Like, we saw What's-His-Face get blown up, but this is how you do it. And, you know, just the fact that she dies like 2 or 3 times within the span of the climax of the movie. You also get another great Sydney one-liner just in regards to passing the torch. And I especially love the makeup effects of just like the Freddy Krueger burnt skin. And of course, how she gets the side of her head blown off, just like how the chunks fly at the very end there. So I think just weighing that against the Richie kill, because I feel like the Richie one was so much more emotionally satisfying. Not to say that this one wasn't, but I would probably put this one lower. You know, I'll put them together. They deserve that. They slayed together and they can die together as well. I want to thank a few of my Patreon supporters like Alicia Joe, James Harrington, Armin Doddick, and Maddie Eaton. If you want to check out even more Scream-related content, you can follow one of these playlists right over here. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.